The archive halls of the Galactic Festival database stretched across 17 planets, each one filled with the collected joy of 1,000 civilizations. Crystal storage units rose from floor to ceiling, humming with data about celebrations that ranged from the simple to the spectacular. Some species celebrated with light, others with sound, a few with complete silence, their festivals marked by the absence of all things rather than their presence. Had walked these halls for 300 years. They were a species known for their patience and their excellent memory. Their skin shifted between shades of gray depending on their mood, and their 4 eyes could process information faster than most species could produce it. For 3 centuries, had served as senior curator, responsible for organizing and preserving the celebratory traditions of every spacefaring species in known space. It was not exciting work, preferred it that way. Excitement led to errors, and errors in the database were unacceptable. The festival database was the most complete record of cultural joy in the galaxy. Governments consulted it when planning diplomatic events. Scholars studied it to understand the emotional lives of other species. Young beings accessed it simply to marvel at the strange ways the universe chose to express happiness. On the morning that everything changed, was conducting a routine audit of recent submissions. A new species had achieved spacefaring status approximately 2 centuries ago, and their cultural data was finally complete enough for a full review. The species called themselves humans, and they came from a small blue planet called Earth in an unremarkable corner of the galaxy. Opened the file and began to read. At first, everything seemed normal. Humans had harvest festivals, which was common among agricultural species. They had coming-of-age celebrations, which nearly every species possessed in some form. They had religious observances, seasonal gatherings, and community feasts. All of this fit neatly into existing categories. Then found the anomaly. A wedding anniversary celebration, dated 50 years after the original wedding. Paused, they checked the file again. Perhaps this was an error in translation. The human language was complex, full of words that meant multiple things depending on context, but the data was clear. 2 humans had bonded in marriage, and 50 years later, they had held another celebration to mark the occasion. The file included images of the event. The same 2 humans, now much older, surrounded by what appeared to be their descendants. There was a large cake with the number 50 on it. There were decorations, there were speeches. Skin shifted to a puzzled shade of blue-gray. They continued reading and found more examples. Anniversary celebrations at 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, 25 years. Humans marked the passage of time after weddings with repeated festivities, each one apparently more significant than the last. A 25th anniversary was celebrated with silver, a 50th with gold. Some humans even celebrated their 60th or 70th wedding anniversary, though by that point they were quite elderly. This was strange, but perhaps it was limited to weddings. Searched further. It was not limited to weddings. Humans celebrated the anniversary of births. They called these birthdays, and they occurred every single year of a human's life. A human who lived to be 80 years old would have celebrated their birth 80 times. Found images of humans at various ages, each time surrounded by decorations and cake and gifts, all to mark the simple fact that another year had passed since they came into existence. The discovery grew stranger. Humans celebrated the anniversary of deaths. They returned to the graves of their loved ones year after year, bringing flowers and speaking to people who could no longer hear them. They celebrated the anniversary of their countries being founded, sometimes for hundreds of years after the actual event. They celebrated the anniversary of businesses opening, of schools being established, of treaties being signed, of wars ending. Skin had shifted to a color that indicated deep confusion. The understood commemorations. Most species did. When something significant happened, you marked it. You remembered it. You moved forward. But humans did not simply remember. They celebrated the same events again and again, each year adding new layers of meaning to moments that were already complete. needed to understand this better. They submitted a request to meet with the Terran cultural assigned to the database authority. Arrived 3 days later. He was a middle-aged human with black hair going gray at the temples and an easy smile that seemed to come naturally to his species. He wore the formal robes of a diplomatic representative, though he had loosened them slightly in a way that suspected was not quite proper. Senior Curator said, offering his hand in the human gesture of greeting. "It's an honor to meet you. I hear you have questions about our festival submissions." Did not shake the offered hand. They had found physical contact with other species uncomfortable, lowered his hand without offense, and settled into a chair across from his desk. "I have encountered an anomaly in your cultural data," said. "I require clarification before I can complete my audit." "Of course, how can I help?" "Your species appears to celebrate the same events repeatedly." Blinked. "Well, yes, we do." "This is intentional." "Very much so." His four eyes narrowed slightly. "Perhaps I am not explaining myself clearly. I am not referring to similar events that occur at regular intervals, such as harvest festivals tied to agricultural cycles. I am referring to the practice of celebrating the same singular event multiple times across different years." Wright said, "Anniversaries." "Yes, this word appears frequently in your submissions. I had assumed it was a translation error." Laughed. It was a warm sound, genuine in its amusement. "No, not an error. Anniversaries are one of our favorite things." "But why?" asked. The question came out with more confusion than they had intended to show. "The event has already occurred. It is complete. What purpose does repeated celebration serve?" Leaned back in his chair and considered the question. Appreciated that he did not answer immediately. It suggested he was taking the inquiry seriously. "Let me give you an example," said. "My grandparents were married for 62 years before my grandfather died. Every year on their wedding anniversary, they would have dinner together. Sometimes it was at a fancy restaurant. Sometimes it was at home with family. But every year, they took time to celebrate the fact that they were still together, that they had made it another year." "Made it," repeated. "Were they in danger?" "Always," said. "Everyone is always in danger. People get sick. Accidents happen. Relationships fall apart. Every year that a marriage survives is a victory, curator. Every year that a person lives is a gift. We celebrate anniversaries because we know that nothing is guaranteed. The fact that something continued to exist deserves to be honored." Process this information slowly. "You are saying that you celebrate survival." "In a way, but it's more than that." Paused, searching for the right words. "It's about gratitude, and it's about choosing to be happy. A wedding happens once and you feel joy in that moment, but an anniversary lets you feel that joy again, and again, and again. We have found a way to multiply happiness by returning to it." This was a new concept for. In their experience, joy was a finite resource. It occurred, was experienced, and then faded into memory. The idea of deliberately returning to it, of stoking it back into flames year after year, had never occurred to them. "I will need to verify this with additional research," said. "Take all the time you need. I'm happy to answer any questions." Over the following weeks, did exactly that. They pulled historical data from every species in the database. They cross-referenced celebrations across cultures and time periods. They looked for any evidence that other species practice something similar to human anniversary celebrations. They found nothing. The species known for their strong sense of honor marked significant events with permanent monuments. They did not return to celebrate. The crystalline hegemony, whose collective intelligence made them extraordinarily efficient, saw no logic in repeated celebration. Resources spent on a second celebration could be better used elsewhere. The dreaming collective experienced time in ways that made the concept of anniversaries meaningless. To them, all moments existed simultaneously. Only humans celebrated the same joys over and over again. sat alone in their office, surrounded by data, and made a decision. They would submit a proposal for a new category in the Galactic Festival database, a category that had never existed before because no species had ever required it. Humanity, it seemed, had invented something new and intended to give it the recognition it deserved. The proposal arrived at the Festival Database Authority like a stone dropped into still water. Ripples spread outward through the academic community, growing larger and more turbulent with each passing day. Had expected some discussion. What they received instead was controversy. The authority convened a special session to evaluate the proposal. The chamber was ancient, built during the first age of galactic cooperation, its walls lined with symbols from species that had long since gone extinct. Holographic displays flickered to life as curators from a dozen worlds took their positions. At the center of it all stood, their skin carefully controlled to show no emotion. "You propose a new category," said elder mathematician, speaking first as was their right. They were a species of pure logic, their bodies little more than geometric shapes that shifted and reformed with each thought. "You propose to call it temporal joy cultivation. You claim that humans invented this practice. Explain your reasoning." "The evidence is in my submission," replied. "Humans engage in a pattern of behavior that exists nowhere else in our records. They celebrate the same events repeatedly, with increasing emotional investment, across spans of time that can exceed a century. This is not commemoration. It is something else entirely." "It is superstition," countered. "The geometric form that served as their bodies sharpened into angles of dismissal. Primitive creatures marking solar cycles because they lack the sophistication to understand that time is arbitrary. We have seen this behavior in pre-spacefaring species across the galaxy. It fades as they develop. With respect, Elder, humans are fully aware that their calendar is arbitrary. They know that an anniversary is simply a return to a specific orbital position. They celebrate anyway. Then they are inefficient. They are joyful." The chamber fell silent, had not meant to speak so directly. Their skin betrayed them, shifting to a shade that indicated they had surprised even themselves. A new voice entered the discussion. Representative Hollowsong of the Morning Spheres spoke rarely at authority gatherings. Their species existed in a state of perpetual grief, processing sorrow across eons as other species processed oxygen. To hear them speak at all was significant. "We have studied grief for 10,000 years, Hollowsong said. Their voice was like wind moving through empty rooms. "We understand the weight of loss. We have never considered its opposite. This concept of returning to joy, of cultivating it across time rather than simply experiencing it once, it is not something we knew was possible." "Because it is not," said. "Joy is a response to stimuli. When the stimuli ends, the response fades. What these humans describe is merely memory. They are remembering joy, not experiencing it." "Are they?" asked curator of the Telluric Archive. "They were an older being, their species long-lived and thoughtful." "The data suggests otherwise. Human neurological scans during anniversary celebrations show activation patterns consistent with genuine emotional response. They are not simply remembering joy. They are feeling it again." "That is impossible." "And yet it is happening." The debate continued for hours. Listened as scholars argued back and forth, their perspectives shaped by the emotional lives of their own species. Those who came from logical traditions dismissed anniversary celebrations as inefficiency. Those from emotional traditions found the concept either baffling or intriguing. None of them had ever encountered anything like it. By the time the session ended, nothing had been resolved. The proposal would require further review, was instructed to gather additional evidence. But something had changed. Word of the proposal had spread beyond the academic community. 3 days after the session, received a message from the Efficiency Collective of Tau. They were a species that had eliminated all non-productive behavior ago. Their society ran like a perfect machine, every action calculated for maximum output. They had never submitted to the festival database because they had no festivals. The message was brief. They requested detailed files on human anniversary celebrations, particularly the practice of giving anniversary gifts. Objects exchanged not for utility, but purely to mark the passage of shared time. The collective had found themselves, inexplicably, fascinated. More messages followed. The morning spheres asked for information about birthday parties. The crystalline hegemony inquired about the economic impact of anniversary industries on human society. Even species that had never heard of began sending queries, drawn by rumors of something new in the ancient database. Was invited to present directly to the authority. He arrived in the great chamber wearing his formal robes properly this time, though noticed he had added a small pin to his collar. It depicted a cake with a single candle. When asked about it, explained that it was his daughter's birthday, and he was wearing it to feel connected to the celebration happening back on Earth. "I will show you something," said, addressing the assembled curators. He activated a holographic display and images appeared in the air before them. The first image showed two elderly humans, a man and a woman, standing together. They were surrounded by people of varying ages, some of them holding children. Behind them hung a banner that read, 50 years. "These are my grandparents," said. This image was taken at their 50th wedding anniversary. They were married in a small ceremony with only 20 guests. 50 years later, they celebrated with over 100 family members, 4 generations of descendants who existed because of that first wedding. The anniversary was not just about remembering the past. It was about celebrating everything that had grown from it. He changed the image. A street festival, colorful and crowded. "This is celebrating its 200th anniversary. The town was founded by settlers who had nothing but hope and determination. 2 centuries later, we gathered to honor their memory and to celebrate that the town still exists, that their dreams survived." Another image, a small building with a sign in the window. "This is a bakery. It has been in the same family for 100 years. They use the same recipe that the founder used. Every year on the anniversary of the opening, they give away free bread to the community. Not because they have to, because joy shared is joy." Let the images fade. He looked at the assembled curators, his expression serious. "I know that many of you find this strange. Your species do not celebrate the same events over and over. You mark something once and move forward. That is a valid approach. But we do things differently. We understand that nothing lasts forever. We know that entropy claims everything eventually. Every year that a marriage survives, every year that a person lives, every year that a community endures, that is a victory. We celebrate those victories repeatedly because they deserve to be celebrated. And with each anniversary, the joy grows deeper, richer, more meaningful." He paused, letting his words settle. "You asked me why we do this. The answer is simple. We have figured out how to be happy more than once about the same thing, and we think that is worth something." The chamber was silent. Watched as the curators processed what they had heard. Some remained skeptical. His geometric form had gone still, calculating, but others had changed. The morning sphere's representative was weeping, a phenomenon that had not been observed in their species for generations. Curator was smiling, a small but genuine expression of understanding. Something had shifted in the room, could feel it. The proposal was no longer just an academic exercise. It had become something else, a window into a new way of experiencing joy. The vote would come later, but already knew what the outcome would be. Humanity had invented something the galaxy had never seen before, and the galaxy was paying attention. 6 standard cycles passed before the vote was finalized. The Galactic Festival database, after extensive debate and review, formally credited humanity with the invention of anniversary joy. The entry defined it as the deliberate cultivation of recurring happiness through the ritualized celebration of temporal persistence. It was the first new category added to the database in 400 years. Recorded the update personally. They sat alone in their office, surrounded by centuries of collected data, and entered the final notation. A small moment, perhaps, but had learned something about small moments from studying humans. They understood now that significance did not require grandeur. Sometimes the quiet acts mattered most. Within days of the entry going live, it became the most accessed file in the database's history. Scholars from across the galaxy downloaded it. Governments requested official copies. Educational institutions added it to their curricula. Something about the concept had captured the imagination of species who had never considered such an approach to joy. And then the changes began. First heard about through a colleague who specialized in their culture. They were a proud species, known for their sense of honor and their reluctance to change. They had marked significant events for always once, always with permanent monuments. The idea of returning to celebrate the same event repeatedly would have been unthinkable to them. But on the 1000th anniversary of their planetary unification, they held a celebration. It was small by human standards, a gathering of leaders in the ancient capital, with ceremonial lights illuminating the city. There were no cakes or gifts or birthday songs. They did not know how to do such things, but they stood together and marked the passage of time, honoring not just the original unification but all the centuries that had followed, all the years their world had remained whole. Reports said that some of the leaders wept, for this was extraordinary. More examples followed. The crystalline hegemony, after extensive analysis, determined that anniversary celebrations could increase productivity by 15% through improved morale. They integrated the practice into their efficiency models, calculating optimal celebration frequencies for various types of events. It was a cold interpretation of a warm concept, but the results spoke for themselves. Hegemony workers reported higher satisfaction levels. Output remained stable or increased. The numbers, as always, had guided their decision. The Dreaming Collective presented a more unusual case. They experienced time nonlinearly, all moments existing simultaneously in their perception. The concept of an anniversary, a return to a specific point in time, should have been meaningless to them, but they found a way to adapt it. They learned to focus their collective consciousness on specific temporal nodes, experiencing what they described as resonance with particular moments. It was not quite anniversary joy as humans understood it, but it was something similar, something new. Even species that had dismissed the proposal now found themselves reconsidering. The Efficiency Collective of Tau, who had requested information about anniversary gifts, began exchanging objects on the anniversary of significant collaborations. The objects had no practical value. They existed purely as markers of shared time. For a species that had eliminated non-productive behavior, this was revolutionary. Tracked these developments with growing fascination. In 300 years as senior curator, they had never seen anything like this. A single cultural practice from a small species on an unremarkable world was spreading across the galaxy, taking root in civilizations that could not have been more different from each other. Maintained contact throughout this period. He sent regular updates about the changes happening on Earth as well. Humans, aware that their tradition had gone galactic, were celebrating with characteristic enthusiasm. Anniversary Joy Day became an unofficial holiday, marked by people sharing stories of their favorite anniversaries. The bakery that had shown in his presentation received messages from across the galaxy, thousands of beings expressing appreciation for their century of persistence. One day sent a personal message. "I'm organizing something," he wrote. "1 year since the database entry was approved, I thought it might be appropriate to mark the occasion. Would you be willing to attend?" Considered the invitation for a long time. In 3 centuries of work, they had never attended a celebration. Observation was their role, documentation, analysis. They stood apart from the joy a necessary distance that allowed them to maintain objectivity. But objectivity, was beginning to realize, was not the same as understanding. They had learned about anniversary joy through data and interviews. They had never experienced it. They accepted the invitation. The gathering was held in a small conference room on the Database Authority's central station. Had arranged for decorations, colorful banners and streamers that looked slightly out of place against the station's functional gray walls. There was a cake, as there always seemed to be at human celebrations. It read, 1 year, in carefully applied frosting. The attendees were a mix of species. Several curators who had supported the proposal, representatives from the Morning Spheres and the Efficiency Collective, curious to observe human traditions firsthand. Even a small geometric shape that recognized as a junior member of department, sent to gather data on the inefficient practice, gave a brief speech. He spoke about what the database entry had meant for understanding, how it had opened doors that no one had known were closed. He thanked by name, crediting them with the initial discovery. Skin shifted to a shade of embarrassment they had not displayed in decades. Then the eating began. Humans had learned, marked celebrations with food. The cake was cut and distributed. Those who could eat did so. Those who could not simply held their portions, participating in the ritual even if the substance was meaningless to their biology. The Morning Sphere's representative approached near the end of the gathering. Their voice was soft, barely audible above the conversation around them. "We have begun celebrating the anniversary of losses," they said, "not to prolong grief but to honor the love that caused it. We return to the day of loss and remember what we had, not just what we lost. It is a strange feeling, grief mingled with gratitude. We did not know such a thing was possible. Consider this. I have spent 3 centuries joy. I never thought to participate in it. And now," looked around the room, the decorations that seemed so foreign against the gray walls, the cake that served no nutritional purpose for most of the attendees, the speeches that said things everyone already knew. None of it was efficient, none of it was necessary. All of it mattered. "I find myself looking forward to next year," said. The Morning Sphere's representative made a sound that might have been a laugh. "We will return. It would be wrong not to." The gathering wound down slowly, as such things did. Attendees departed in small groups, some exchanging contact information, others simply nodding farewell. Was the last to leave, pausing at the door to look back at. "Thank you for coming," he said. "It meant a lot. Thank you for inviting me. I have learned something today." "What's that?" Skin shifted to a color that indicated contentment. It was not an emotion they had displayed often in their long life. "I have learned that some things are worth repeating, that returning to joy does not diminish it. That time, which takes so much from us, can also be a gift if we choose to see it that way." Smiled. It was the same warm expression he had worn at their first meeting, unchanged by the year that had passed. "That's the whole point, curator. That's everything." He left and stood alone in the empty room. Around them, the decorations hung in colorful disarray. The remains of the cake sat on a table, evidence of celebration consumed. Tomorrow, the room would be cleaned, returned to its functional gray purpose. The moment would be over. But not forgotten, and next year, if had anything to say about it, not unrepeated. They returned to their office and opened the database entry one final time. The edit was small, just a few words added to the closing summary. "Anniversary joy, human origin status spreading." Saved the file and closed the console. Outside, the stars continued their ancient dance, indifferent to the small moments that mattered so much to the beings who lived beneath them. But in offices and homes and gathering spaces across the galaxy, something new was taking root. A human invention, simple and profound, was teaching 1,000 worlds how to be happy more than once. It was thought worth celebrating,